What evil plots have you successfully hatched? This happened 2 years ago when I was in grade 10. My school has a bring your own banana week where if you brought a banana, you would get a free banana sundae, though you could also buy one for $2. Being the business savvy young man that I am, I purchased several bunches of bananas for about $3 per bunch. Come Monday at lunch, I started telling a few people that I could sell them a banana for $1 so they could get their sundae for half the price. They told their friends and so on until come Wednesday, I had a fully established banana dealing operation. I ended up making about $85 in profit, though the experience was priceless. I lasted the entire week before I was shut down. The vice principal walked up and did the whole, "What are you up to here, son?" bit. He ended up giving me a 2-day suspension. It started out being 1 day, though he didn't take too kindly to me jokingly offering him the rest of the bananas to let me off the hook. So fast forward to Monday, I was sitting at home due to my suspension when I started getting texts from my friends. I kid you not, the announcements that morning said, "From this day forth, the sale of bananas on school property is strictly prohibited." I have to say, it felt pretty awesome. This was in Canada, in case anyone is wondering. Alright, so Kitty here in this first story became a banana cartel boss in like a week. Forget Wall Street, folks, this kid's going straight to the banana exchange or the slammer doing banana bribes. But that banana bribe, gold. Story 2. It was my senior year in high school and I had taken a blow-off math class. I walked in one day and noticed that my seat was right next to a countertop that held plants. Behind the plant sat an electrical outlet. The next day, I brought in an old toaster and a friend brought frozen waffles. The toaster was very old, as in the brave little toaster's brother, you know? Nice and shiny aluminum. We hid the toaster behind the plants and made everything we could for like 3 weeks. Waffles, Pop-Tarts, toasters, strudels, toast, and even some garlic toast slices. This went on for weeks with everyone except for 3 people in the room absolutely clueless as to why period 2 smelled delicious. On the last day, we brought bread, cheese, and crab meat along with the George Foreman grill. I made as many deluxe grilled cheeses as I could until the teacher came by and heard the sizzling. I looked up with my greasy spatula and just calmly said, "What?" I was halfway through the second loaf of bread. Story 3. My grandfather taught high school history, and my father had a somewhat unique opportunity of being in his own dad's class his junior year of high school. Similar to another post in this thread, they also had a year-long simulation. Students were divided into small groups, quote-unquote nations, and had to interact with one another. Economics, foreign relations, etc. Those who did poorly, their nations failing to thrive, would receive an F. This was about 40 years ago, mind you, and would have to write an additional essay to have any hope of getting an A in the class. Basically, my dad broke the simulation. Internally, he allowed all of his imaginary citizens to starve. He ran his economy into the ground, poured it all into his military, and nuked half the class in the first week. He held the remaining nations hostage for a combination of in-simulation goods and services, and real-world cookies and whatnot. While this didn't make him particularly popular with his now-failing classmates, and though my grandpa pretends to be pissed when he tells the story, I think he was secretly proud. Story 4. For the past 10 months, I have been steadily moving furniture in my apartment an inch or 2 at a time, just to screw with my girlfriend. When she comes in someday, she goes to drop her keys on the coffee table and they hit the floor instead, or she'll try to sit on the couch and stumble and catch herself. I think I have her convinced she's having some kind of inner ear problem and that's why she always feels vaguely disoriented. When the next semester starts, I'm going to go into her buildings before her classes and slightly move furniture there too. This dude's evil. Let's make a bet in the comments. How long did their relationship actually last? Story 5. In high school, we had a refrigerator in our electronics home wiring room for quote-unquote education purposes. The teacher let us run a club and my buddy and I were the organizers of this club. My buddy had a candy hookup as his grandfather was a candy supplier, not even sure what that means, and we were able to get deep discounts on candy and soda to stock the fridge. We sold stocks or shares in the club and used the money collected from this to purchase the candy. Of course, the candy was free or donated or acquired. I didn't ask questions. We thought $5 to buy into the club to get started would be a good investment opportunity, and people could then trade their shares, but they could only get 1 share per student. We raised a grip on the IPO. Over the course of the year, we stocked the fridge and sold stuff out there between classes and during class. It was quite lucrative, to say the least. We would also buy up the shares of other students for $5 to $10 when they forgot lunch money or needed quick cash but never sold them. We had acquired most of the shares, but a few held out for the big profits. The last week of school arrived and we counted all the loot. No books, just a money box and a jar full of change. It ended up being $36 a share. It was quite the enterprise. So the day had come for the final shareholders meeting and the remaining holders wanted to hear how much profit they had earned. The stocks are cashing out at $20 per share. Everyone was going crazy. They couldn't believe their $5 had turned into $20. Story 6. At my last school, I never got caught for anything, although I deserved to get caught for so much. I never did anything bad personally. I just orchestrated everything. Everybody knew it, but nobody could prove it. Deleting texts, emails, calls, everything. Making sure people knew damn well if they got caught, they didn't know me. At first, it was just petty crap. Hey, go get me something's phone. Hey, go tell that guy to keep away from me. That kind of stuff. It escalated a lot further than it ever should have. I ended up with bodyguards. I had a mole in every room. People were making me money by stealing small stuff and selling it, giving me 60% of the proceeds. Eventually, people noticed that something was up with me and all these guys I had following me. People tried to do it themselves. Only one succeeded, a guy we'll call Michael. He clearly followed in my footsteps. Now, I needed even more. I needed spies, people on the inside. I found out they were meeting at 5 p.m. after school in the gym planning their moves. I needed to destroy the competition. Informing all of my people, we started the attack halfway through their meeting. No weapons, just a brawl. I stood back and watched the chaos unfold in this large room regularly reserved for basketball players at this hour. As I left that room, something hit me. I was ahead of a freaking gang. Story 7. I took a free enterprise course my senior year in high school where we played a business running game. The premise behind it was that 28 of us were split into 7 teams of 4 people, and each team ran a corporation that would sell stock goods at your own price. There were fees to be paid each week based on employees, upgrading facilities, machine wear, R&D, which made your goods quote-unquote better, etc. The first thing I did was conspire with a few other groups to arbitrarily set the pricing, and for the first few weeks, I spent all of our income on upgrading our existing facilities to produce massive amounts of goods. And around Christmas, I broke the cartel pricing and dropped the price around 50%. Because of our huge infrastructure, we were able to sell the goods very cheap and still maintain large profits. The other groups, however, well, they had simply coasted along with profits and when hit with the pricing change, couldn't keep up. We drove the entire class to bankruptcy in a little over a month, so for the final semester of high school, we were the only remaining functioning corporation. Monopolies are fantastic. Story 8. When I saw this topic, I got excited because I thought we would have something in common. But what I read instead is what I would expect to be a plot from a Disney Channel show. Here is how a real president runs his student council, serving as president for 3 years after transferring into the school the sophomore year, being the only name on the student council bank account holding $25,000, taking control of all vending operations, both drink and food for the entire school, and carrying the keys to the machines with you. Note, it is shockingly easy to get reelected if you give out free Mountain Dew. Getting school administrators to resign before a vote to fire him took place. Trust me, he needed to go. Taking school funds to hold student council meetings at restaurants and movie theaters. Requesting and receiving keys to the building that opened all doors and a security code to deactivate the alarm. I had real power, not the power that you get by handwriting a constitution on an A4 sheet of paper and making references to fight clubs on it. Story 9. Not hatched per se, but an interesting story nonetheless. In my senior year of high school, one of the required classes was the U.S. government. As one of the activities, the teacher instituted a mock government. 3 different classes, each class served as one branch, executive, legislative, judicial. As a little bit more backstory, this was also right around the time that Tom Clancy released the book Clear and Present Danger, which I had already read, and I knew the teacher was reading at that time. So when he started using ideas from that book in the mock government, I decided to have a little fun with it myself. Since I served one class period each day as an aide for this teacher, essentially I'd help copy papers, grade exams, etc., I took advantage of this fact and became a spy. I collected evidence, presented it to the judicial and legislative branches, and almost took his little mock government exercise to the ultimate point, impeaching the mock president. As a result, the mock president ended up terminating me, which didn't stop the roller coaster ride. So rather than have to go through that aspect of it, the teacher ended the exercise early. A few weeks after he ended it all, he pulled me aside and jokingly asked, "Why'd you have to go and almost impeach the president?" I looked him square in the eye and said, "You knew I'd already read Clear and Present Danger. It was your mistake to base things on that." His only response was something along the lines of, "Point taken, good job." A few years later, I ran into this teacher again and asked if anyone had ever yet gone as far as I did with the mock government activity. He replied, "No, and I hope they never do." Story 10. When I was in 9th or 10th grade, I created my own religion that mirrored how Scientology works. I named it Bathroom Readerism based on my love of the book series at the time, and I organized a hierarchy that was based initially on a first come, first served basis. The ranks emerged from Pope to Dirty Peasant, with loads of weird ranks in between, such as Swami and Grand High Muckamuck. My group of friends joined on faster than I had anticipated, and soon a couple of people who I knew as acquaintances got on board as well. Some of the latecomers weren't pleased to be labeled as peasants, so I introduced a system where they could move up the ladder by giving me loose change. I promoted it with massive group emails that I had been writing, and I'd include updated ranks along with it. Soon, the ranks were changing faster than I could manage to update everyone, and at this point, I decided I'd grown tired of overseeing my religion. I decided to sell my religion to the highest bidder after 1 week. A bidding war erupted between 2 or 3 of my disciples, ultimately ending at $10. It passed immediately after I handed over control. The whole thing lasted 3 weeks, and after all was said and done, I was $15 richer. Yeah, exactly how religion actually works sometimes in the real world. I bet their original pope is still bitter about being dethroned by a $10 buyout. Talking about a hostile takeover. Story 11. In a senior literature class in high school, the teacher, pretty awesome woman, although I disapprove of her literature taste, told us to write a creative piece based on the themes of a book and possibly present it. It was breath-eyes memory. Some themes were trauma, insanity, etc. So I decided to write corn, hardcore, girl-on-girl corn. Then some friends and I acted the whole story out in front of the class, and I just thought, well, I'm going into engineering, so why not actually have fun during this literature class? The teacher later told me she had to read my story bit by bit, not in one sitting because she was traumatized. To be fair, she was quite a rainbows and butterflies kind of woman, too. Story 12. In my final year in school, I was elected to the student council. After being elected, I was quickly nominated as president simply because of the fact I was the only person that had any previous experience with the council. I was the only person to be re-elected from the previous year. Anyway, halfway through the school year, I felt as if other senior members were threatening my position. Like, seriously, guys, this was serious freaking business. A few of them had made offhand remarks about wanting to become president, with one even going so far as to quote-unquote jokingly suggest that we should hold a new vote. To sort out this problem of mine, I wrote out a new constitution that would basically give me absolute power. To pass this new constitution, I needed the support of 2/3 of the council. Because the junior members of the council, which made up more than 50% of the entire council, knew me pretty well, getting their support was pretty easy. I'd grown up in the same neighborhood as some of them and was on a first-name basis with all of them. The other senior members didn't really socialize outside of their own circles, much to their detriment. And to have the Constitution passed, I needed 2 more signatures from the senior members. The first thing I did was offer our current secretary the position of vice president. In return, he gave his support for my new Constitution. Finally, I went to one of the guys that had previously expressed their ambition about becoming council president. I handed him the new Constitution. I pointed towards the signatures and told him it had already passed. I lied. I also asked him if he wanted to be with me or against me. He went red in the face and kept shaking his head while he read it. He spent about 10 minutes studying it, looking for some sort of loophole to exploit. But I had thought of almost everything. During one of the classes that we shared, he sat in the desk directly in front of me and continued reading it. At random intervals, he just looked back at me in shock, completely speechless. Finally, at the end of the class, he turned to me and said, "This is your enabling act." He then said, "If you can't beat them, join them." Thankfully, he didn't realize that I needed one more signature, so he just signed it right there in front of me, effectively passing my new Constitution. Wait, isn't this how real politics works out? Story 13. I did a student congress debate at my school. This was my first year, and on my third, competition, I managed to get 2 alliances pitted against each other with me at the head of both, funneling votes. I got my 2 friends and said, "Hey, I really want to do well. Want to start an alliance?" They agreed, and I told one to tell other people to start an alliance, and the other friend to ask the others in our chamber, a group of people debating. They each got around 4 or 5 people, and I had mostly everyone in my chamber on 2 conflicting alliances. I then sent the order down that the person who started the alliance was putting their bills up for all of the issues. All three passed near unanimously. The people who had opposing arguments did present them, but when it came to the vote, they voted for me. Story 14. My class went to Islands of Adventure last year, and while getting in line for the Harry Potter ride, an employee made a remark about muggles, so naturally I turned around and said, "We're not muggles. We come from the North American School of Wizardry and Witchcraft, NASWAW for short." It was funny for about 5 minutes. When we got on the bus back to school, someone started talking about it, and I had to explain it over and over again. Flash forward to Monday, and by that point, my whole program for smart people at a super ghetto school was in on it too. It soon turned into a sort of Hogwarts-like thing, and people had what house they were in, classes they took, professors, yada yada yada. I involuntarily became the headmaster and the rest of my IOA group the professors. And by this point, the whole school, about 1,500 7th and 8th graders, was in on it. People I didn't even know were talking about and enrolled in a pretend school I made up as a joke. Eventually, it got really bad and arguments and minor fights broke out. A couple of friendships were temporarily ended because of it. I never really cared much and messed with people who got really into it by awarding and taking away points to their houses. I found it all really funny. This lasted about half a semester before the teachers ended it. Story 15. Sophomore year in high school, 1997, I started a small investors club. By junior year, 98, my club had over 50 members. I went to a huge school. I told everyone to invest in the school event fund for dances, retreats, etc. So a few weeks after that, the fund grew to $5,000 from all the investing, charities, and fundraisers. In senior year 99, I took the $5,000 and told everyone to raise it to $15,000 for the Millennium Party 2000. By November 1999, we had $15,000 in the school's fund, which I had unlimited access to because my friend was the president of the student government club. On January 5, 2000, I took the $15,000, invested it into a stock company, and got away with $32,000 of the investors club money. I left the school by choice in February. When asked about the missing money, I told the school board that the principal had been involved in a substance trade and got 10 of my friends to vouch for me. Story 16. I posted the story before, but it is relevant. In college, I was in Model UN, D&D for Poli-Sci geeks. We were the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, which meant we were tiny, insignificant, and worst of all, bored as crap. Since at the time we were relatively a new country, the only international issue we had going for us was the dispute over our name. Greece claims the name Macedonia is Greek and for the longest time protested if anyone in the international community referred to us as such, hence the long name as FYROM. Anyway, so we're at this rather prestigious Model UN conference and we decide to get our names changed. We're sick of raising our placard in the back of the room and nobody being able to read it. So we scoped out the Greek delegation and noticed that there were two rather ditzy-looking blondes among them. They didn't seem to know what they were doing. One of my delegation members and I sidled up to them, and when they were alone, and asked them if they'd mind if we changed our name. We promised drinks later if they'd come to the Security Council with us and say it was cool. They did, and we spent the rest of the afternoon and evening getting so hammered I ended the night with a Macedonian flag as a cape and an ice bucket as a crown. The next day, we got grim news. It seems one of the other members of the Greek delegation realized they'd been bamboozled, and they protested to the people running the conference. As an added kick in the jewels, they called the Greek consulate in the town where the conference was. Someone from the consulate in turn called the conference organizers and threatened a formal protest at the real UN if they didn't fix this. The next day, we were presented again with our old FYROM placards. Story 17. Every year, my elementary school would hold a big fair day to raise money. It had all sorts of game booths, competitions, and a bake sale. It was great. There were two booths that I had particularly interested in, the toy booth and the Lucky Dip booth. Both sold toys that had been donated. You could browse the toy booth just like a shop, and each item had its price. The Lucky Dip booth had a large bin full of toys wrapped in newspaper. You paid 50 cents and picked a package, and you never knew what you would get. My parents weren't the richest, but I would always get $5 to spend. I would head straight for the toy booth and Lucky Dip booths, get some choice toys, and sell them to other kids for more. The best day I had, I ended up making $20. Story 18. I have a hobby. I go to websites with whatever token-based services I can make a free account for. Then I try to convince the girls or distract the audience enough that the girls keep their clothes on. I am particularly proud of one scenario. Beautiful girl, I mean like drop-dead gorgeous. She was already in her garments, and it was clear from the way these conversations go, she was ready to go. I noticed that her window was open, and I start to talk about how cold it is in my area. Then I mentioned how much I wish I had a blanket. We hit it off, and she makes me a mod. Eventually, I turn the attitude of the room from being inappropriate into a conversation. I even get the girl to start bad-mouthing guys who bug her on a cam website designed to get girls to do stuff. And I am now allowed to get the people who asked for the girl to show a little something something blocked or banned from the room. And if you're enjoying the video and the show so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 19. Did something a little milder in my college. The then actual president of the student council needed to reform the constitution. But in my case, I had to pass the legal department and the head of administration council, public university. So in order to get it passed, he needed a really well-dictated constitution and a fairly strong argument. Since I'm a law student, it was kind of easy for me. Anyways, to keep it short, I amended the text. He proposed it as his own. The text added a new member who ended up voting me in as the new president, since he couldn't be reelected and because he was, of course, a friend of ours. And when I became president, I ditched him and asked the ex-president to maintain this position as previously planned. This way, we both managed to stay in the student council. To be fair, I ended up voting the ditch guy in as the head of student of our faculty, law, so he ended up pretty well too. Politics in university may seem kinda irrelevant, but it can be some serious crap with huge egos and personalities. Anyway, thanks to this, I ended up meeting the chief of the Supreme Court of my country, as well as many other high-profile politicians. It's a thing that if you are into it and have a little skill, could be very worthwhile. I even worked with anti-intelligence agents once. Story 20. In high school, a kid dared me to smash a window with a stick. A Marty McFly reaction occurred to me when he started calling me a chicken, so I did it. Not one of my prouder moments. Turns out karma kicked in because the kid had actually set me up and ran off to dob on me. I realized as he ran off that he had left his bag behind. We didn't have lockers at my school, and I noticed that he had a football sticking out of it. I grabbed the football, which conveniently had his name on it, threw it through the broken window, and got rid of the stick I'd used to break it in the first place. When he returned with the teacher, I told them my version of the story, which consisted of the other kid breaking the window with his ball. Of course, the ball was in the classroom, and that didn't help his case. Long story short, he got suspended for not only breaking a window, but also for lying. I got in no trouble at all. Story 21. Yeah, one day someone posted a picture of me on Facebook from a party involving alcohol. I didn't particularly like that picture there. I asked her to delete it. She told me to screw off. Anyways, kind of angry, I tried guessing her Facebook password. Browsed her info section and combined a couple of things. I got it, deleted the photo. Anyways, I was curious. I tried logging into her email with the same password. It worked. I found some videos and pictures of her and a guy who wasn't her boyfriend having intimacy. Naturally, I downloaded them. I set up an email account on Tor and contacted her, blackmailed her, and in return received incriminating photos of others. Anything to save your own bum, right? And the pattern went on. I received incriminating information on over 100 people, and all anyone had to go on was an email address that couldn't be connected to me. I made people do some things, leave so much money in a secluded spot. I'll know if you're messing with me. Mail the money back with a return address leading to the post office 3 towns over because honestly, I didn't care much about making money. It's amazing how much control you can get over so many people with just a little bit of information. I deleted the files a little later and sent a mass email informing them that the files were gone before abandoning the account. Say what you will about being a schmuck, I could have done a lot worse than I did. And honestly, I just wanted to see if I could do it. Story 22. I had grown annoyed with a peer who always claimed to be a massive fan of whatever band my friends and I had talked about the day before. And we managed to convince him that Nautica was a pirate metal band based in Florida that was doing a reunion tour. They lasted 1987 to 1990s up the eastern seaboard. Some highlights include him claiming that he didn't know song titles because he just listened to them on YouTube, as well as asking for tickets to their gig. There were a few days where quite a few people I was minimally acquainted with went up to him and told him about their love for Nautica. One of our teachers even informed the kid that he liked Nautica. Eventually, though, we told him. Story 23. You are quite the sly politician with an iron fist. In my schools, the student council never had enough power to do anything really serious. Host fundraisers, plan events, etc. Not sure if that's the case at all schools, but I think people only ever cared about it because they could put it on their college applications. A friend of mine told me a similar story once about the school band. Every spring, the members vote on next year's band leadership, and he was competing with another member for the position of head conductor. And these two did not like each other. So he did some wheeling and dealing. He leveraged his popularity with the other members to convince another member running for president to make him head conductor and keep the other guy out of all major positions. It worked, and I was in our dorm room when the loser came by for them to discuss some band issues. The silent tension between the two was intense, but, they maintained their professionalism the whole time till the other guy left the room. Oh, band nerd politics. Story 24. We did something in high school that involved our student council. We were supposed to look at winter formal locations in a week, but the president and I, the treasurer, liked this one place we'd seen. We brought two other members to look at it, took pictures, and showed it to the entire council. I wrote the check for the down payment. Our advising teacher needed to approve of the place, but she hadn't even seen it. She said she wanted us to go ahead and look at all the places to make sure which venue we wanted. Well, despite what she wanted and had decided, we all voted against her and chose the place we had written the check to for a week before, since, we already wrote the check. Story 25. During my final year of high school, I created an online yearbook anonymously to undermine the crappy official school yearbook. The idea was that people could write honestly about what they actually got up to in their high school years without worrying about being censored or getting pulled up by the school for crap that they had caused. There was also a voting section where people could anonymously vote for things like who they thought was most likely to become prime minister, have an unplanned pregnancy, etc. Access was limited to registered members, and the entire site was built by me from the ground up. So were the terms and conditions that people read when they signed up, terms and conditions that gave me as the site's admin unlimited access to their voting information and registration info. It's not really surprising what people say about their friends when they think that they can hide behind anonymity. The best part, though, I also discovered that people often use their Facebook passwords for any official-looking registration page without thinking twice. Story 26. I had a criminology class in high school wherein the teacher would often show us those 48 hours type shows and then fast forward so that we only saw the courtroom scenes. After we watched the show, he would split us off into juries to deliberate and come to a verdict. Having recently seen 12 Angry Men, I decided to reenact the film. The guy was obviously guilty, but I methodically poked holes in the prosecution's case to the point that eventually we had a unanimous vote of not guilty. Dude had ended his whole family or something, but because of me, our group voted him not guilty. The teacher said ours was the only group that had ever done so. That may not be evil, but I'm up for real-life jury duty in 2 weeks. Wahaha. Story 27. There was this prissy witch running for president in my senior year. I have this really nice but extremely socially inept and eccentric friend, let's call him Medved because that's his nickname, who was from Russia. We used to make communism jokes all the time with him. So, to ensure that Miss Prissy Witch McWitcherson didn't rise to power, I signed Medved up for the election and launched a full-out propaganda campaign. I literally took posters and photoshopped Medved's face onto them and posted these all over school. We called him Dear Leader Medved and basically emulated a Soviet campaign. We had people at the daily assembly go up to the mics and declare support for Medved. In his election speech, he freestyle rapped in Russian, he was awesome for this, and pulled one of the funniest question and answer periods the school had ever seen. In the end, he won by a significant landslide. Take that, Miss Prissy Witch. Story 28. On the opposite side, actually, I became the embodiment of good in my high school world studies course. We were reenacting the caste system of India, money granted with an economic system and all in place, and I was chosen to be part of the upper caste. I decided to become Gandhi and take all of my wealth and material possessions and bring them to the lowest caste. I declared my actions to the teacher, got up from my table with the upper caste, and brought all of my raw materials and such to the other side of the room where the untouchables sat. The teacher wasn't thrilled that I was messing up her example of the caste system, but I called her a British oppressor and went through with it anyway. Story 29. In History 12, we had to make Fascist speeches to the class, and after the whole class would vote on who they thought won. A couple of kids brought in extra ballads. The ballads were ripped up paper, and they had the highest number of votes because of that. The teacher announced their victory, but then I yelled, "Stop!" and stood up. I walked over and told her I would harm her family if she ever claimed that anyone aside from myself is the dictator. I then erased everyone's votes from the whiteboard, gave myself an obscene amount, and wrote that it was decreed that I was the eternal God King Caesar Khan. I sat back down, telling the teacher that she may continue. She, along with the rest of the class, was stunned. She then said, "Well, I guess that's that. He won," and congratulated me on my landslide victory. The class protested, but the teacher reminded them there were no rules and that I had embodied a fascist takeover quite well. Story 30. In my senior year of high school, I didn't like the fact there were Christian and Muslim clubs at our school, so I did what any atheist would do and decided to make a Pastafarian club. The original idea wasn't mine, but I ended up spearheading the movement and galvanizing student support. Essentially, our goal was to get a page in the yearbook next to the Christian and Muslim clubs. Even with a teacher sponsor, we weren't allowed to form our club. The administration was Christian and didn't like the idea of our club. They told us we couldn't form our club halfway through the school year because it was too late in the school year, even though a club that applied for sponsorship right at the same time as us got the okay. They told us we didn't have enough support from the younger grades and thus our club wasn't sustainable. So I printed off a bunch of petitions and handed them out to friends. In 2 days, we had over 500 signatures. School was like 2,000 kids. Even after getting the support of our VP and all these kids, the admin still said no. Finally, we held our club meeting without admin permission. I brought several pounds of spaghetti, someone else brought mac and cheese, and we made newspaper pirate hats. We ended up using my cold spaghetti as decoration for the photos the invited yearbook committee took. Then we disbanded. As the year continued, the admin insisted we would not have our club in the yearbook, but as a yearbook committee was formed of students, we had a few wins. In the end, we ended up getting a full page for our club that only met once. Story 31. Battle of the bands in high school, and I was in 3 of the 6 bands competing. 2 of them were the best of the 6, no doubt, and the last was probably the 4th best. Anyways, my father's company was a sponsor, and I was in the club that helped organize it. The competition was held at the church I attended, and I was good friends with 2 of the 4 judges. The guys in the best 2 of my bands also went to this church, and one of the judges was writing my recommendations for colleges. Needless to say, my bands placed 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Story 32. I've posted this before, but it was late and got buried. In my high school economics class, the culminating project for the semester was for the class to run some kind of business on campus. The first part of the project was for the class to vote for officers of our corporation. At the end of the voting, all of the offices were held by close friends and my girlfriend. I was in a runoff for the president of the company with another more popular student. The teacher asked us to make a pitch to the class. I took it seriously. He promised to bring cookies. He won. As a SOP to my pride, he offered to put me in charge of our IPO. The class company offered stock, and students in class had the opportunity to buy shares to help purchase the muffins or donuts or whatever we were going to sell. I'm sure he didn't put much thought into it, but I was still steaming over having been beaten with cookies. So instead of issuing enough shares so that everyone in class could buy one, I issued double the number of shares as there were people in class. I immediately bought half of the shares. Once the IPO was complete, I moved for a new vote for president of the company, got a friend to second. The teacher knew what was going on and allowed it. Maybe 3 people voted for me, everyone else voted for him. I easily had enough shares in the company to win. The rest of the class period mostly consisted of angry students yelling at me for being a schmuck. One kid even teared up, and it wasn't the guy who had been president. Story 33. I did all sorts of crazy crap in 8th grade. One time, me and 2 buddies of mine were all wearing red, green, and yellow shirts. We hatched a plan to where I would lean way back into my chair, so my teacher would make me stand up the rest of class. After a while, I, who was wearing red, would sit down when she wasn't looking, and my yellow-wearing friend would stand up. After a while, yellow man sat down and green friend stood up, then he would go down and I would get up. We effectively made a stoplight to mess with her. It was hilarious. Everyone was cracking up. Our teacher found out and thought it was hilarious, so we all laughed. I also made a teacher get so mad by messing up her counting note cards, she threw them on the ground and yelled, "I can't do this anymore," and she stormed out. She was a long-term substitute and pretty crazy at that. Story 34. Me and a friend had a little tradition of sorts back at school. So there was this big antenna on the highest roof of our school. You could get up there by climbing onto the roof right by the teacher's lounge and then making your way over a couple more buildings, catwalks, and ventilation ducts. Upon reaching that promised roof, we would drink a bottle of liquor and stick the bottle upside down on the antenna for the whole school populace to see. The roof was well visible from the courtyard. The bottle would usually stay up there for a week until the janitor took it down, which just meant another night of climbing and drinking for us. Fast forward a few years when passing my old school, I look up and I see a bottle on that antenna. Feels good, man. Traditions, traditions. That janitor must have developed a serious bottle removal routine. It's practically a school sport at that point. Story 35. I hope someone sees this, although it's not that evil. During my senior year, I would get a lot of rides from my friends. Well, I thought it would be funny to convince someone that a car was being tracked. I took an old FRS radio and gutted it, taped an older battery to it, and ta-da, fake GPS tracker. I popped it into my buddy's trunk when getting my bag out one day. Unfortunately, he never really took note of it. Coincidentally, though, I kept bumping into him while driving around town. Not literally, I am a good driver. He did notice this, and he even joked I must be tracking his car, to which I just smiled. This group of friends consists of insane geeks with no girlfriends to take up time, so anything is possible in his mind. He believes I am tracking his car and proceeds to search his car. He doesn't find the thing despite it laying openly in the trunk, but I know he'll see it soon, so I put it under the fabric where the spare tire is when he isn't looking one day. Then I pass him on the road in the most incompressible way ever. We left somewhere at the same exact time. I took a scenic route home because it's a nice day, and we somehow meet face to face at an intersection. I play it up and give him a pew-pew with a gun hand as I drive by, and this coincidence convinced him fully. A few days later, sitting at lunch, he walks up with a straight face, slams the tracker down on the table, and then has an expression I can only describe as, I freaking win. Story 36. My school used to have a photography class with a huge darkroom. Past few years, they just use the room for storing random crap. It was completely out of the way and blocked off by massive doors. The AV room was filled with unused TVs, so I just grabbed one and had my friend help me haul it into the darkroom, which I dubbed the batcave. It was my senior year, and I had things more or less on cruise control. So over the course of the year, I wired in the school's cable, giving me dozens of channels, and brought in a multitude of gaming consoles, a mini fridge, and a DVD player. I just skipped class and relaxed there most of the day with other friends dropping in and out throughout the day to play Super Smash Brothers or order pizza and just watch TV. Nobody beyond my friends ever knew about it, not even the teachers. Story 37. Junior in college, I never really understood why people sold their books to the bookstore or other students. So halfway through my freshman year, I began renting them out at fares lower than bookstore prices. Since I was getting them back at semester's end, I knew that I could just roll over the profits for more books since other people would be selling their used books around that same time. Next semester, I buy $400 worth of used math books, new edition, only been used one semester, and would need to be used by most all freshmen in the coming years. Total to be about 22 books. I rent them all out to people for $40 a semester. The semester ends, I claim about $800. Repeat process. I now have amassed 70 plus math books and about 30 other various subjects for other majors. Already have them shipped out and brought in about $3,500 for this semester, and in December we'll repeat the process. To be safe, in May I will be selling all of the math books back to the bookstore, since a new edition will likely be coming out in 2014, and I can still make about a final $40 to $50 book in this way for a fail-safe profit. Story 38. In year 7, we set up a fake town at school. It was pretty similar to what others have described here, where you purchase your desk and can buy others, etc. You also had various jobs. I was the IT guy who kept a never-ending stream of problems going with the computer that needed my expertise to fix at a higher rate than I was supposed to get. You could also start a business. Anyway, this was a slow way of making money, so my friend and I photocopied the money. Somehow the teacher never caught on. By the end of the semester, my friend and I owned every desk except the ones we sat at because people stubbornly refused to sell their last classy possession to us. We also ran a side black market business selling fake class money for real Australian dollars. We were gods. Story 39. During senior year of high school, I'd wake up, take a shower, get dressed, and walk down the street. Then I'd promptly lay down in my neighbor's driveway and fall asleep. Eventually, he'd be ready to go to school, wake me up, and I'd get in his car and fall asleep. He'd drive to school, where I'd get out, go into the band room, go into the instrument storage room, set up a couple tall tuba cases, lay down behind them, and fall asleep. At lunch, I'd get up, have a sandwich, play some Soul Calibur on a Dreamcast we had set up in one of the band lockers until the next period, which was a band where I'd sit down and fall asleep. At the end of the band, I'd then go to my last class where my teacher hates me. As soon as the bell rang, I'd put my head down on the desk and the teacher would immediately kick me out, and I would lay down in the hallway and, yes, fall asleep. Finally, the bell would ring, I'd go and get on the bus and fall asleep. What I'm trying to say here is y'all had way too much going on. Senior year is for naps, not class. And if you agree and you like these stories too, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.